Another in our series, Meet Your Ambassador, with His Excellency Hubert Charles of Dominica, up next on Carib Nation. Hello, welcome to Carib Nation. I'm Doris Dean, and today we're talking with another ambassador, Ambassador Hubert Charles of Dominica, one of the larger, even though often considered small islands in the Caribbean. And welcome to Carib Nation, Ambassador.
Thank you very, very much, and I'm pleased to be here.
It's a pleasure to finally get a chance to talk with you. I know you've been here for a while.
I have been here 3.5 years.
Yes.
Yes, and we have talked.
Yes, it's always difficult to get ambassadors because
right.
you're always traveling or
That's
something.
Right, that's right.
But we like to try to have our audience get to meet you, to know a little bit about your philosophy in Washington. We know that your job as ambassador is to deal with the State Department, the OAS, but we'd like to know how you see your role in this position. Okay. And how you connect with your constituents.
Interesting. I think the first point to be made is that the ambassador is the premier representative of the government in the host country. So my first role is to represent the interests, the views, the programs and projects of the government of Dominica with the United States. You mentioned State Department. That is usually done in our interaction with State Department and other government departments. That is probably the most important function, because this is an important country, not just hemispherically, but in terms of the whole world.
Picture.
And you wish to at least make sure that your views are understood, not always agreed with, but certainly understood in the United States. The United States is also the destination of a large majority of our migrants, whom we consistently see as our nationals.
Of course.
And as such, this is a place to be in terms of relating with the diaspora in a way that benefits our home country. But there are also other responsibilities of the ambassador. I am also the representative of the OAS, and not of the OAS, at the OAS.
At the OAS, yeah.
And there, what you want to do is to make sure that you strengthen relations, not just with the Secretariat, but with the other member states that are around the table, as it were. I'm speaking about the Council. And to make sure that the economic and political relations between the Latin American branch of the organization and the Caribbean branch, that is as strong as it needs to be. We can talk about that at some stage.
Yes, I would like to.
But certainly in terms of my overall views, I believe that there is a place for small states. I believe also that the OAS and that Washington allows for projecting some of those views or own ideas onto the international stage. I believe, of course, as small states, we cannot but be very strategic in terms of our relations. Hence the importance of the United States, but also the importance of the relationship with other small states.
Right.
And so the CARICOM project is always up for discussion.
Foremost, yeah.
And always important for us because it strengthens the mission that I spoke about, the projecting of the views of small states onto the international stage, that if done together and done consistently and persistently well and considered in a considered fashion, helps to offset the disadvantages that you have in
As a
terms of
small
size.
state, yeah.
You know, so I'm actually quite hopeful. My background is history, and I've always looked at North America and the Caribbean, but now I have an opportunity to look at it from a slightly different perspective.
Yes.
And over the last 3 years, I've come to value even more positively the role of diplomacy as a tool for small states. You know, so.
Do you think then that the Caribbean, I know that in the OAS, the Caribbean is a group of 15 countries, a sort of a little pocket in a larger
Yes.
sphere.
Yes.
Do you think that the Caribbean is able to hold its own and make its point as strongly as it should in such a...
And you're talking about the OAS and
The
hemispheric
OAS,
context.
yes.
Yeah. I would say yes, and I think historically we have been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
As to whether we continue to do that much more effectively, because as we go forward and as the geopolitical situations change, it increases the level of difficulty that we have in terms of interfacing with other countries. But I certainly, looking at the core of ambassadors that we have at the OS at the moment, given as well the respect, call it the respect, that the others have for the views of the states, no matter how small. Mm-hmm. I believe that we really do have the capacity. In fact, much more than that, I think we have a moral obligation, mm-hmm. because there are many areas in which, and the maintenance and building of peace is one of those, where we bring to the table less passion, less baggage, mm-hmm. And certainly a more present sense
sort of
of
a balance.
The future.
I see.
You know, in other words, rather than riding constantly on the back of history, mm-hmm. which is important, but we are able, I think, to show that history may be important. The current difficulties that we face as a hemisphere may
we must look back at that.
But we need always to look
keep
forward,
looking forward
to see, and I think in areas the role of the small states is being recognized and respected, and that has been there for a little while.
Yes.
You know.
Now, I mentioned earlier that Dominica is often considered one of the small islands of the Caribbean, but
Yes.
it is really bigger, as
Yes.
I was very seriously reminded that it's bigger than Barbados, where I'm from. But we don't hear a lot about what Dominica is doing.
Yes.
And I wanted to touch on Dominica's role in the CARICOM
Yes.
spectrum, so to
Yes,
speak,
yes,
so that
yes.
we have an idea of what is it that Dominica brings to the table.
I don't think we bring any more or less to the CARICOM table than any other, you know. Mm-hmm. But we do have a body of experience. We do, on the other side, have some issues which over time have made visibility a little difficult. Mm-hmm. I think even now it is fair to say that when North Americans think of the Caribbean, they think of the Caribbean more in terms of the tourist destination
Of course.
of choice. Mm-hmm. We have been on the periphery of that,
Yes.
largely because for a long while, now we do not have the sun, sea, and sand type attraction
Right.
that is the
rest of
destination of most of the tourists.
Yes.
So the visibility is related to the traditional tourist
Mm-hmm.
model. One of the things that we have been able to bring to the table is the importance of making that Caribbean tourist product much more complex.
And diversified.
And diversified. In other words, I think even though other countries, Grenada, St. Lucia, do have the potential for ecotourism, there is no doubt, and I think this is not a boast, this is just a statement of fact,
yes.
that the heritage, the natural heritage of Dominica suggests that we be in the forefront in terms of ensuring that the rest of the market understands that the Caribbean tourism product is not just sunset and sand,
Right.
that it is culture, that it is nature. And in those two areas, I think it is fair to say that Dominica has a fair degree of leadership. And that we accept that responsibility. And in the councils, in the international councils, either among SIDS or within the tourism organization, we have been pushing for the diversification. So that for me is one of the areas of leadership. I could hazard another, because look at where we exist. Look at where we are located.
True, yeah.
We're located between Martinique and Guadeloupe. We then, by dint of that geography, we have a very close relationship. And it's not just political. Over time, many of our migrants have gone. In fact, historically, it was very difficult to see any major link or fracture between those three territories. So we see ourselves as having a responsibility to open the door, as it were, for closer relations with our French neighbors.
And bridge
that cultural gap. It is important because the new Caribbean that I think has to be developed and nurtured for the future is a multilingual Caribbean. We have already, certainly in terms of our relationship within the OAS, we have done quite a bit. In fact, if you go to the schools, you will find that Spanish, rather than French, is now the most important foreign language that students move towards. But we have to do a little more, and we are geographically well placed to do that. So the leadership really is in the area of, I call it a non-traditional model of development. We have, for example, to continue working on our agriculture. That has always been an area of strength. We have to continue working on our tourism. As I said, we do have the resources that allow us to be a leader in terms of ecotourism. And there is a third area in which we have leadership responsibility, and I think, again, it's a natural, it's an endowment by nature, and that's geothermal energy.
Of course, yes.
Because we have, with Nevis, done the most, gone the furthest in terms of developing those resources to put us in a position, number one, to lower the cost of energy to our consumer, but also to open the door to greater industrialization based on relatively inexpensive energy. So we are there.
Yes, and that would be very helpful for the Caribbean as a whole. Now, the Caribbean Tourism Organization has also taken on this role of, or changed their format of advertising to make sure that the Caribbean is now seen as a destination, as a regional destination.
Single destination.
Rather than hand-picking.
That's right.
And I think that will probably be one of the leading avenues to assist in helping places like Dominica rise to the surface.
Yes, absolutely, you're absolutely right. Selling the region as a single destination, a complex one, and raising the possibility that the visitor could not just go to one destination, but within that set period, visit probably 2 or 3 and have a more complete and diversified experience.
And better understanding of the culture.
And come out with a better understanding of of the Caribbean reality,
exactly.
which one can say has been hidden for quite some time.
That's the reason we do this, because that was our impetus.
Yes, yes.
18 years ago,
Yeah.
and that was to help people understand that we are a diverse region, that there's a lot to us, and it's a lot more than just sand and sea. That,
absolutely.
That there's so much complexity in the region.
Actually, going back to this whole question of almost introducing Dominica, we like the idea of positioning ourselves as a country of the future. It doesn't mean that the rest of the Caribbean doesn't have a future. All of us have a future. But in Dominica, we feel that we have a mix of advantages that suggest that going forward, we have a better than average chance of reaching viability, achieving the success that has over time eluded us for quite some time. Yeah. And there are three factors that I want to highlight. One is the environment, which for a mix of factors has remained almost untouched.
Pretty pristine, yes.
You understand?
Yes.
Historically. And the second one is agriculture, environment, if you can put agriculture and environment together. The soil remains fertile, the traditions of agriculture remain in place. The distribution of land in a way that allows for a relatively okay food security base, because many people in Dominica have a little piece of land and they just don't keep it, they farm it. But added to that, the whole question of energy. So, let's add a fourth then, water.
Yes.
And we are probably one of the richest in terms of water. And we have done a fantastic job in terms of distributing water to our villages and so on. The next phase is commercializing water, because for all intents and purposes, we are water rich. And superimpose on that the education and institutional bases that are no different from the other
rest of
islands
of the
Caribbean. We feel that we have a good base for realizing a significant degree of success and viability going forward.
One of the issues that I think the Caribbean has to take seriously, there are two issues. One is the diaspora, the role that the diaspora can play in helping with development. But the other is going back to agriculture and really taking agriculture seriously, especially when we look at what's happening around the world.
Yes.
Do you think then that Dominica can play a leadership role in convincing the rest of the Caribbean that imported food is not necessarily the best? It's costing too much.
Yes.
And if we're not going to be growing sugar, then there's food to be grown.
Yes.
There's something to be done with that land.
Yeah. We do have some work to do in terms of our agricultural future. I'm one of those who do not like the idea of going way back to slavery to explain why we have a problem with our agriculture. I don't think it has anything to do with our cultural traditions. I think it has to do with a sense as to what is necessary, not what is possible, but what is necessary. We have, for too long, sought to move from one major export crop to the other. That has a historic base.
Yes.
So if you look at Dominica, we've moved from so many. We were once a major coffee producer, cocoa producer. We moved from that to limes, and we moved from limes to bananas, and and in between we were a very major citrus producer.
Yes.
But I'm not too sure that we've ever come to the realization from policy and from a practice point of view that all of those mixes
are important
at the same time.
Exactly.
That the agronomic and other practices of our small farmers need to be such that you do your vegetables for your home plate, but that you aggregate your production of 1 or 2 or 3 in order to satisfy the market. I think very much the prescription remains that we need to find a mix of products. There are some elements in our agricultural establishment very reluctant to move away from bananas, and one needs to understand why. The bananas were probably the most successful of all the monocrops that we tried or we were engaged with, largely because it was so well distributed within our rural communities. The smallest,
everybody benefited.
Everybody benefited. Everybody could engage with this industry. But we need to find the similar things for exotics, for berries, blueberries, And incidentally, there's very little that cannot grow in Dominica.
Yes, because the soil is so fertile.
But also we have a range of soil types, a range of growing conditions. So we need to find what the market wants, and now the market really wants these exotic fruit and vegetables. And there's nothing to say that we should not experiment to move. We need, for example, to move back into vanilla, which is now a very high priced, high value agricultural produce. And that is something that Dominica was very good at. That vanilla is a product of my childhood. I remember with my parents going to bud, the vanilla. So there's no reason why we shouldn't reintroduce that. I spoke about exotic fruit. So our policymakers and our private sector representatives need to work together to come up with that mix of factors. And I want to emphasize one of those, because part of the difficulty of small states is that the role of government is so predominant in a small state that we've grown to believe that everything that needs to be done must be done by government. I think this has been too ingrained in our development psyche, and so we really have to move away from that, because government has just a limited capacity. It's just so much a crucial role and responsibility. But for me, we need in the Caribbean, and I'm referring to the Caribbean, not just to Dominica. We need to create the space where our private sector feels that they have a great role to play.
This is a subject that I think we can do a whole program on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But we have about another 5 to 7 minutes, and I'd like to talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
Where in Dominica did you come from? How did you grow up? What is your family like? And how did you get here?
Oh, that's interesting. I was born in a little village outside of Portsmouth, the main town. So I'm from the north of the island. Grew up, went to school in Portsmouth, and at that time I think we had 3 secondary schools. So and all of them were in Roseau. So I moved like most people to Roseau for secondary education. I went to the Dominica Grammar School, and after that went to UWI, and did history and economics, and came back. Had the good fortune to get a scholarship to go to Hopkins University, and did history.
Johns Hopkins in Baltimore.
Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, did history and anthropology, which explains my passion with culture.
Yes.
And then I was fortunate to join UNESCO. So UNESCO was the entity that was responsible for my other education. So I'm talking about the non-bookish, the developmental, the international. And I, in that capacity, I first moved from Dominica to Barbados, and then to South Africa, then to Mozambique, and then I ended my UNESCO career in Nigeria, having spent 6 years there, and came back home, you know, and the most important passion really for me always was Dominica. I've always loved. Several of my colleagues, while we were in the international community, had a challenge to decide where they were going to live, where they were going to retire. I was fortunate in the sense that I've never had that as an issue. It was always going to be Dominica. So after UNESCO, I went back to Dominica, and I was invited to be president of the Dominica State College, which also explains to some extent my UNESCO background, because I've always been involved in education. So I was pleased to do that, but it was really not part of what I wanted to do. Believe you me, I really wanted to do farming.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Well, you would have probably been in the right place.
I really wanted to do farming, and I probably should say still want to. But then I suppose the UNESCO experience, the international experience, and the proximity that I had to the policymakers, and the sharing of views as to what it is that needs to be done about this country of ours. I suppose that is what opened the door for the US position, you know, and I haven't regretted it.
That's good. I was going to ask you whether you enjoyed it. Well, of course, having the worldly experience of working in Africa and other places, it would not have been a very difficult step for you, I'm sure.
No, I know, particularly in terms of the work that was done in UNESCO, I think it's not the same, because there you're working for an international organization.
Of course, totally different.
But here you are working with government. Actually, the limitations that you find in the diplomatic area, knowing that you actually representing a government, you do not necessarily find in the international arena, even though you are representing an agency.
Right.
You do have a little.
They're rounding me up here, so I did want to get that point in, that it would be useful. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I appreciated talking with you, and I'm sure that our listeners have a pretty good understanding now of who, and that the fact that Dominica is not part of the Dominican Republic.
Oh,
and that's another issue.
I didn't think it was necessary, given our
very
audience.
Often, the people, when you say Dominica, they think that you mean the Dominican Republic.
But I must tell you, it's something that's easing.
Yes.
We're managing to deal with that.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you so much again for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you many more times about different things.
I would love to come back and we can focus on something, probably diplomacy in the Caribbean.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Thank
you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks again for watching us in Carib Nation, and remember, our motto is one people, one culture, one Caribbean, one nation. Until next time, I'm Dara Steen.